Welcome to my channel, where we dive deep into the world of law. Whether you're a law student, bar reviewee, legal practitioner, or just someone looking to better understand the law, you're in the right place. Remember, ignorance of the law excuses no one from compliance therewith. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest legal insights. Hey everyone, today I'll be sharing with you 14 landmark cases that have shaped the interpretation and application of psychological incapacity under Article 36 of the Family Code of the Philippines. This legal concept has been pivotal in the declaration of nullity of marriages, and these cases have defined and refined our understanding over the years. Let's dive right in, starting from the earliest case to the most recent. 1. Santos v. CA, January 4th, 1995. 2. Ming Tsoi vs. CA and Gina Lao Tsoi, January 17, 1997. 3. Republic of the Philippines vs. CA and Molina, February 13, 1997. 4. Brenda B. Marcos vs. Wilson G. Marcos, October 19, 2000. 5. Republic vs. Dagdag, February 9, 2001. 6. Lorna Guillen Pesca vs. Sasamo A. Pesca, April 17, 2001. 7. David B. Dettel vs. CA and Sharon L. Corpus Dettel, January 29, 2004. 8. Macarubbo v. Macarubbo, February 27, 2004. 9. RPV. Hano, May 20, 2004. 10. SIAYNGCO vs. SIAYNGCO, October 4, 2004. 11. RPV. IYOY, September 21, 2005. 12. Antonio v. Reyes, March 10, 2006. 13. Ferraris v. Ferraris, July 17, 2006. 14. Tan-Andal vs. Andal, May 11, 2021. Finally, the said 14 cases will be explained in succeeding videos. In the case of Santos v. CA 240 SCRA 20, January 4, 1995, the Supreme Court delved into the concept of psychological incapacity under Article 36 of the Family Code. Luis Santos married Julia in 1986, but their marriage quickly encountered problems due to interference from Julia's parents. In 1988, Julia left for the U.S. to work as a nurse, promising to return, but she never did. Luis argued that Julia's abandonment and lack of communication for over 5 years showed her psychological incapacity to fulfill marital obligations. The court ruled that psychological incapacity must be characterized by gravity, juridical antecedents, and incurability. It must be so severe that a person is unable to carry out the ordinary duties of marriage, rooted in issues that existed before the marriage, and must be incurable. The ruling emphasized that psychological incapacity is not simply about marital difficulties, but about a deep-seated mental incapacity to understand and perform the basic obligations of marriage. Expert opinions from psychologists and psychiatrists are vital in these cases, but the incapacity must have existed at the time the marriage was celebrated. In the case of Ming Tsoi vs. CA and Gina Lao Tsoi, 1997, the Supreme Court of the Philippines tackled the issue of psychological incapacity within marriage. Ming Tsoi and Gina Lao were married in 1988, but their union was never consummated. Gina sought an annulment, arguing that her husband's refusal to engage in sexual relations was due to psychological incapacity, possibly stemming from his alleged homosexuality. Despite the husband's claims that it was the wife who avoided intimacy, the courts found that his continuous refusal to fulfill marital obligations without a valid reason was tantamount to psychological incapacity. The court emphasized that one of the essential marital duties under the Family Code is the procreation of children, and that a prolonged, senseless refusal to engage in sexual relations undermines the integrity of the marriage. In the end, the Supreme Court upheld the annulment, declaring the marriage void due to the husband's psychological incapacity. Let's dive into the landmark case of Republic of the Philippines vs. CA and Molina, a crucial decision in Philippine family law. In 1985, Ronaldo O. Molina sought to nullify her marriage to Reynaldo Molina, citing his immaturity and irresponsibility. While the lower courts ruled in her favor, the Supreme Court reversed this decision. The court emphasized that irreconcilable differences and conflicting personalities do not automatically constitute psychological incapacity under Article 36 of the Family Code. The ruling clarified that psychological incapacity must be proven as a grave, clinically identifiable condition existing at the time of marriage, and not merely difficulties in marital life. The burden of proof lies with the petitioner, and any doubt should favor the continuation of the marriage. This case sets strict guidelines for interpreting psychological incapacity, ensuring that annulments are not granted lightly. Let's discuss the landmark case of Brenda B. Marcos versus Wilson G. Marcos, October 19, 2000. Brenda Marcos sought to nullify her marriage, claiming her husband's psychological incapacity under Article 36 of the Family Code. The trial court initially ruled in her favor, but this was overturned by the Court of Appeals. The key issue was whether a psychological evaluation of Wilson Marcos was necessary. The Supreme Court ruled that while psychological incapacity can be proven through the totality of evidence, a medical or psychological examination isn't mandatory. However, Brenda's evidence fell short. The court found that Wilson's behavior, including abandonment and alcohol abuse, stemmed from job loss rather than an inherent psychological defect present at the inception of the marriage. Thus, the Supreme Court upheld the validity of the marriage, emphasizing the need for evidence that psychological incapacity is grave, deeply rooted, and incurable. In the case of Republic versus Dagdag from February 9, 2001, the court addressed the issue of psychological incapacity in marriage annulment cases. Erlinda Matias and Avelino Dagdag were married in 1975 and had 2 children. However, shortly after the wedding, Avelino's troubling behavior began, disappearing for months without explanation, forcing his wife into unwanted sexual relations and inflicting physical harm. Years later, Avelino abandoned his family and was never seen again. Erlinda, left to fend for herself, discovered that Avelino had been imprisoned and had escaped. She then filed for the nullity of their marriage on the grounds of psychological incapacity. However, the Supreme Court denied her petition, emphasizing the need for clinical or medical evidence to prove such incapacity. The court ruled that Erlinda failed to meet the guideline requiring expert testimony on the root cause of Avelino's psychological incapacity. Additionally, the allegation that Avelino was a fugitive from justice was not sufficiently proven. The court also noted that the trial court had prematurely rendered its decision without giving the prosecutor the opportunity to present evidence. This case highlights the stringent requirements for proving psychological incapacity in annulment cases in the Philippines. In the landmark case Lorna Guillen Pesca versus Zosimo A. Pesca, the Supreme Court of the Philippines tackled the issue of psychological incapacity under the Family Code. After years of emotional distress, Lorna Pesca sought to annul her marriage, citing her husband's emotional immaturity, irresponsibility, and cruelty. However, the court ruled that these traits did not constitute psychological incapacity as defined by law. Psychological incapacity, the court emphasized, must be grave, severe, and existing at the time of marriage. It's not simply emotional immaturity or a difficult personality. In this case, the marriage was upheld, underscoring that marriage is a sacred social institution protected by the state. While the court sympathized with Lorna, it stressed that total termination of the marital bond requires more than just dissatisfaction or hardship. In the case of David B. Dettel versus C.A. and Sharon L. Corpus Dettel, the Supreme Court tackled the issue of whether infidelity constitutes psychological incapacity under Philippine law. David Dettel sought to nullify his marriage, claiming his wife Sharon's repeated acts of infidelity and abandonment showed psychological incapacity. The court, however, ruled that infidelity, on its own, does not equate to psychological incapacity. Psychological incapacity under the Family Code refers to severe personality disorders that render a person incapable of fulfilling the essential obligations of marriage, such as mutual love, respect, and fidelity. While Sharon's actions were indeed grounds for legal separation, they did not meet the stringent criteria for nullity of marriage. The Supreme Court ultimately affirmed the decision to deny David's petition. In Macarubbo versus Macarubbo, 2004, the Supreme Court dealt with a complex case involving multiple marriages. The respondent, Edmundo Macarubbo, married the complainant despite being already married to another woman. He convinced the complainant and her family that his first marriage was void. Later, he entered into a third marriage, abandoning the complainant and their children. Macarubbo argued that the complainant forced him into a sham marriage while fully aware of his previous marriage. However, the court rejected his claim, stating that the fact strained credulity. The court highlighted that psychological incapacity cannot be used as an excuse for repeatedly entering into marriages and abandoning families. As a result, the court found Macarubbo guilty of gross immorality and disbarred him from the practice of law, underscoring the importance of upholding moral standards in both personal and professional life. In the 2004 case of RPV Hano, the Supreme Court examined the claim of psychological incapacity as a ground for nullifying a marriage. Lolita Quintero Hano sought to annul her marriage to Toshio Hano, arguing that his psychological incapacity became evident only after their wedding. The core issue was whether Toshio's abandonment of his family was enough to prove psychological incapacity. The court ruled that abandonment alone does not equate to psychological incapacity. To nullify a marriage on this ground, there must be clear evidence of a disabling psychological condition that makes a person incapable of fulfilling marital obligations. In this case, no such evidence was presented, and the court emphasized that proving psychological incapacity requires more than showing. In the 2004 case of Sireno versus Sireno, the Supreme Court tackled the issue of psychological incapacity as a ground for nullifying a marriage. Manuel Sireno sought to end his 24-year marriage to Juanita, claiming she was psychologically incapacitated due to her controlling behavior, obsessive cleanliness, and conflicts with his family. However, the Supreme Court ruled that these behaviors, though challenging, did not meet the legal definition of psychological incapacity under Article 36 of the Family Code. The court emphasized that psychological incapacity must be a serious and incurable condition that exists before the marriage and impairs the ability to fulfill essential marital obligations. In this case, the court found that Juanita's behavior was a reaction to marital stress, not a pre-existing psychological disorder. The court overturned the Court of Appeals decision, reinforcing that the presumption is always in favor of the marriage's validity. Simply having irreconcilable differences does not render a marriage void. The ruling in 2004 underscored the need for clear and compelling evidence to nullify a marriage on the grounds of psychological incapacity, irresponsible behavior. This 2004 ruling underscores the stringent standards set by the court for nullifying marriages based on psychological incapacity, regardless of the nationality of the parties involved. In Republic vs. IOE, 2005, the Supreme Court addressed whether psychological incapacity could void a marriage under Article 36 of the Family Code. Reyes claimed that his wife, Feli, was psychologically incapacitated due to her abandonment, infidelity, and erratic behavior. However, the court ruled that these actions alone did not prove a grave psychological illness. Article 36 requires evidence of a psychological condition so severe that it prevents a spouse from fulfilling basic marital duties, and this condition must have existed at the time of marriage. The court emphasized that mere incompatibility, emotional immaturity, or even infidelity does not meet this threshold. The ruling reinforces that the law is not a tool for dissolving marriages based on irreconcilable differences, but requires a deeper, proven psychological incapacity. In Antonio versus Reyes, 2006, the Supreme Court tackled the issue of psychological incapacity as a ground for nullifying a marriage under Article 36 of the Family Code. The petitioner argued that his spouse was psychologically incapacitated to fulfill her marital obligations, citing her persistent lying and inability to distinguish between reality and fantasy. The court emphasized that psychological incapacity must be grave, severe, and incurable, rendering a person incapable of understanding the essential obligations of marriage. In this case, the respondent's pathological lying and detachment from reality were key indicators of her incapacity. While the requirement of incurability typically necessitates clear expert testimony, the Supreme Court ruled that the totality of the evidence sufficiently demonstrated the respondent's psychological incapacity was indeed incurable. As a result, the marriage was declared null and void. This ruling underscores the importance of psychological stability in marriage, and sets a high standard for proving psychological incapacity in legal proceedings. In Ferraris versus Ferraris 2006, the Supreme Court of the Philippines addressed the critical issue of psychological incapacity as a ground for nullity of marriage under Article 36 of the Family Code. The court emphasized that psychological incapacity refers to a grave, serious, and permanent psychological illness that must exist before the marriage and renders a person unable to perform essential marital duties. The court ruled that mere personality disorders, quirks, or marital conflicts do not meet the threshold for psychological incapacity. In this case, the petitioner failed to prove that the respondent's behavior was due to a debilitating psychological condition. Instead, the court found that the issues in the marriage stemmed from personal disagreements, not from an incurable psychological illness. Ultimately, the Supreme Court upheld the sanctity of marriage, stating that an unhappy marriage does not automatically mean it is null and void. The petition for nullity was dismissed, reinforcing the legal protection of marriage as an inviolable institution. The Supreme Court's ruling in Tan-Andal versus Undal marks a significant shift in how psychological incapacity is interpreted under Article 36 of the Family Code. Previously, the courts required stringent criteria, often necessitating clinical or expert testimony to prove psychological incapacity as a basis for nullity of marriage. This landmark decision redefines psychological incapacity as a legal, not medical, concept. It emphasizes that psychological incapacity need not be permanent, incurable, or clinically diagnosed. Instead, it can be proven through the totality of evidence, including testimonies and observed behavior during the marriage. This ruling eases the burden on individuals seeking a declaration of nullity, making legal relief more accessible. It broadens the understanding of psychological incapacity, ensuring the law better serves those it was intended to protect. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more, stay tuned for the upcoming content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I've got plenty more in store that you won't want to miss. See you in the next one.